I'm Cheney Hill, an instructor at Rice University, and you're listening to Gulf Streams on KPFT, Houston 90.1 FM, Galveston 89.5 FM, and Huntsville 89.7 FM, where we talk with leading experts and community leaders to better understand the environmental problems and potential solutions facing our community. A quick reminder that you can catch up on Gulf Streams anytime through our podcast, available on all major podcast platforms. If you enjoy the show, please like and subscribe to make sure you never miss an episode. In Houston, farming doesn't always look like endless rows of crops or wide open pastures. Instead, it often happens in smaller plots on the city's edges, someone's backyard, or even tucked away within our own neighborhoods. Regenerative farming takes those spaces and asks more of them, not just to grow food, but to restore soil, conserve water, and create healthier ecosystems. It's a way of farming that looks backward, drawing on long-standing traditions of stewardship, while also pointing forward to a more sustainable future. In a region better known for freeways and refineries than for farmland, these practices might seem unlikely. But in and around Houston, farmers and community leaders are showing how agriculture can be resilient, restorative, and deeply connected to place. Today we'll hear from the lead farmer at the SkyFarm in downtown Houston, and Stephanie Gray, who works as a volunteer for the Ag Extension Office as a master gardener and is now the Children's Environmental Literacy Foundation Texas Program Director, both of whom are proving that agriculture here can be both resilient and restorative, even in the shadow of highways and refineries. First, we're sitting down to chat about the SkyFarm, a project of the Blackwood Educational Land Institute, with August Stubler, the lead farmer and educator at the site. We'll explore what the SkyFarm is up to these days, how August found his way into this work, and the principles of regenerative agriculture that guide everything they do there. So, August, can you introduce yourself a little bit for our audience?
Good morning. Yeah, it's nice to be here, Cheney. So my name is August Stubler. I am the lead educator and farmer at the SkyFarm. Career-wise, I consider myself to be an agroecologist. I have a master's degree in sustainable food systems and a bachelor's degree in sustainable community development. So those are the ways in which I am involved in the programming at the SkyFarm. Mm-hmm. If you ever come to a class or come to volunteer, I will be the person out there working with you most. So anyone is more than welcome to come and visit us and see us.
I am curious. So, agroecologist.
Yes.
What exactly is that? What does that entail?
Yeah. So the idea is that I am familiar with agricultural systems. I am also familiar with native ecology. So, having the background knowledge of both of those things, I tried to interweave those ecosystems because there are benefits to doing so. Mm-hmm. More conventional agriculture is pretty exclusive to cultivated plants, and then people who are working in ecological restoration are mostly exclusively working with native plants. So I work with both and figuring out what it means to understand the gaps in agriculture and how they can be filled by the natural ecosystem.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And so I'd like to learn a little bit more about the Blackwood Educational Land Institute and specifically, the work that you do with SkyFarm.
Yeah. So the Blackwood Educational Land Institute was founded about 40 years ago, I think, by Kath Conlon. She has been our leader for that amount of time. She oversees both the SkyFarm and our land farm out in Hempstead, but the work that we do is land education. So getting people connected with the tools to then develop their own individual connections to the land. The SkyFarm specifically, we do a lot of public and community education. We are at a very publicly accessible site. So when we have families or individuals come to us, a lot of the times these are people who have never engaged in nature education before. Mm-hmm. They have not engaged in agricultural spaces. So we really enjoy having that public-facing position at Post Houston because it allows us to engage with a whole larger demographic that we otherwise wouldn't be able to get to our other farm in Hempstead. So it's really great. It is very accessible, and we work with different community members and student groups to get them educated, get their hands in the soil.
Get their hands in the soil. I love that. So you mentioned Post Houston and
Yes.
You mentioned accessibility. So can you tell like where exactly are y'all located? How do people get to y'all? Kind of those kind of more basic things.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're on the roof of Post Houston. That's the decommissioned post office that is now a cultural hub. There is a very popular food hall. There's office spaces, museum, and art exhibits. But we are on the roof. So if you take an elevator in the building, you're going to go ahead and hit the R button. And we are on the far east side of the building. So you see the white events tent where we'll often have our classes, but they also host different weddings and events up there. So
cool.
Yeah, we're able to utilize that space for teaching classes. So we're just on the far side of that tent.
Okay. And then to get there, you mentioned earlier in a previous conversation that, buses, railways, and then y'all validate parking as well to make it accessible. That's part of that accessibility part.
Yes, yeah. So we never want money or transportation to be an issue for people. So if anyone parks in the lots that are available at Post, we validate your parking before you leave. We are also putting together maps of the metro and the rail routes that run alongside Post because it's in downtown. I am also working on putting together a map that shows the closest bike route and where to lock up your bikes. Yeah. So especially as Houston is moving more towards making public transit accessible as accessible as possible, we want to make sure that we're also playing a role in that. I've been getting more and more people who come to volunteer who, when I ask if they need parking validation, they're like, no, I rode the rail. And I'm like, that's awesome. That's exactly what I want you to do. So we're trying to build resources as an institution to make that easier for people to navigate too.
Right. Okay, awesome. So now that people know how to get there, let's imagine. Okay, so I am going to the SkyFarm for the first time.
Yes.
What can I expect? What's the experience going to be like?
Ooh, that's a really good question. Typically, if you already have a preconceived notion about what a farm or a garden looks like, it's still going to be different.
Okay, cool.
A lot of the farm ecosystems or even the garden ecosystems that we're acquainted with are very exclusively cultivated plants, or they are native plants that are kind of only for the pollinators or only for the insects and animals. But the work that we do at the SkyFarm, each field is dynamic and has its own story that it's telling. So each season looks completely different on the farm. There's always something going on. I love people who come both with a set of knowledge about what farming and gardening looks like and people who have no idea what they're walking into. It always brings a really diverse and interesting range of questions that I think really helps guide people's experience of the space. But typically right now, we're growing things like okra, roselle, which is used for sorrel, and agua de Jamaica. So people who are from like Central South America, the Caribbean, Africa are able to recognize those plants and resonate with those a lot. We also have lots of medicine plants that are cultivated. So lavender, oregano, lemongrass, thyme, rosemary, all those classics. And then we also have our native plant partnerships. So those are beings that come to the space. Their seeds are dropped from the wind or the birds, and we learn how to balance the ecosystem to accommodate for their presence.
And so on that point about balancing the ecosystem, right? So y'all do regenerative agriculture. So
absolutely.
Tell us a little bit more about how that works more broadly, but then also how y'all practice it in this kind of unique space.
Yeah. So generally the way that I think about regenerative agriculture is you're not planning just for one season, you're planning for every season after. So if the core principles and practices that you implement in each individual season are drawing more resources up from the land than they're giving back, then you're not regenerating anything. So what that looks like for us is we try and keep the farm very closed loop. There are lots of practical reasons why we do that. We are up on a roof, so getting things up there is really difficult. We also have like a weight capacity, so we can't just be adding things willy-nilly to the roof. But that is as simple as having different cover crops and ground covers that help protect the soil and the microbiome, but doing so in a way that the land calls for. So the ground covers that we have, a lot of them are native and a lot of them I didn't plant. But by seeing them and observing them and knowing how they interact with the space, we're allowing them to proliferate and benefit the ecosystem. So great example is wood sorrel. Wood sorrel looks a lot like clover. She's a nitrogen fixer because she belongs to the legume family. She's a forage crop, so she's edible, and she also is pollinator friendly. So really awesome. And it started with just a really, really small patch. But by having a close relationship to the land and knowing who comes to that space, we are able to build those partnerships. Conventional agriculture does not allow for that slow of a pace. So having the SkyFarm in such a publicly accessible site is really important for us because we want people to understand that this is what agriculture could look like if we took the time to care for the land instead of expecting a product, essentially.
Right.
Yeah.
So you mentioned closed loop. So by that you mean...
Yeah. I start smiling and nodding. Closed loop meaning that we try to see the resources that are available in the ecosystem instead of bringing them from the outside. So that can look anything like we're trimming down our tall lemongrasses for the season. Otherwise, that stuff would be thrown away or composted, but it works really great as a mulch, you know? Or if we have a section that is considered weedy necessarily to the outside eye, those areas are protecting the microbes in the soil. They grow really tall, they put off their seeds, and mowing them down allows us to add biomass to an environment that has a very limited soil capacity. So seeing the challenges as opportunities, especially on a rooftop farm, is really helpful. And it's been really great to see how the farm has grown. I mean, I've been on staff for 2.5 years now, so it's been really awesome to see how the transitions have been made to before. When we were growing, we were very much replicating a more conventional food system. And now that we have allowed the land to speak for herself, we get to see the story that she tells, and we get to participate in that in a way that honors the resources and the beings here a little bit more.
Can I ask what story do you think she's telling?
Ooh, that's a really awesome question. I have seen Indigenous activists speak about the land as very generous. And I think that is generally how I also see the land speaking, is that whenever we are looking for that pie in the sky, something that we wish would just drop and fall into our hands and be the automatic solution, nature and the earth generally already have those solutions available for us. So it's about training your eye to see those resources where they are instead of expecting to extract them from another place. The form of agriculture that we practice, even amongst some of the sustainable agricultural nonprofits in town, is very unconventional. So I really enjoy having such a publicly facing platform at the SkyFarm because we do get to interact with people at the upfront. It allows us to inform their experiences of agriculture and regeneration a little bit more acutely than if they had already been to a large farm. And it's really awesome to see those connections.
You say that it's unconventional. Can you talk more about that?
For sure. Agriculture in Texas is definitely way more yield oriented. We are very extractive in our land management practices. So that can look like anything from a farmer is growing a few hundred acres of one thing. They finish that for the season. And instead of finding a way to compost the material that's left in the field or find a way to use that material to protect like the microbiome in the soil, it is instead gutted and tilled. And then they go ahead and they plant their seed for the next crop. And it's kind of back to back with no break. So unconventional definitely speaks to the rest that we allow the land to have. So that's another part of this is we use cover crops and ground cover alternating with our growing spaces, but we also have periods of rest. That is very important. So when you learn about sustainable agriculture, they will talk to you about how important it is to have those times where yes, you can grow things in that soil. Yes, you can then grow things that are beneficial for that soil that fix nutrients or mulch or whatever. But those periods of rest are really important for the recuperation of those ecosystems. So having our fields be dynamic, where they're not just one single thing, it's 5 or 6 different things going on, allows us to see the need in those spaces.
And so, okay, that's really interesting. Thinking about the types of things y'all are planting there, and you already mentioned a few of the things y'all have right now.
Yeah.
Are there any like pairings that you typically do at SkyFarm? Do y'all? I know y'all rotate in terms of what y'all are planting seasonally, but talk to us a little bit more about what that actually looks like on the ground at SkyFarm.
Yeah, for sure. So if I think about our Roselle section, for instance, so I love Roselle. She's beautiful. I had a cup of Roselle tea this morning. But our Roselle is very drought tolerant. We've been saving the seeds off of these plants for about 4 years now, which is really incredible.
Yeah.
So I have planted seed that was saved from 2 years ago and seed that was saved from last year. And the difference between them is remarkable. Just how the plant grows in terms of orientation. Is it growing upwards? Is it growing out? Are the leaves yellowing in the sun because it's insanely hot up there? Are they able to put on growth in the hottest part of the summer? So plants are adaptable. They are incredibly adaptable. So whenever we think about what a space looks like, we want to consider who's already there. So in our Roselle patch this year, there are lots of spurge plants. So spurge are a native. They are considered a weed. I think of myself as a beekeeper. Beekeeper not just of honeybees, but of other bees as well. And so spurge flowers have blooms that are, I don't know, a couple millimeters big. They're very, very small. And the bees that pollinate them are that small as well. So whenever we have our beautiful bushy Roselle plants, letting those spurges grow up, because they don't compete for nutrients. They are accessing different levels of the soil. Because we do things in such a slow way, I know that allowing the spurge protects the soil, creates nutrients. It also provides resources for beings that are already here on the land. We have other things that we put in those spaces too. So I had a volunteer group out maybe 3 weeks ago, and we scattered bean seeds and also zinnia seeds. So making those spaces as dynamic as possible and recognizing that companion planting is not just about, oh, I have one plant right next to another one. It's about growing things all together and allowing their connections underneath the soil to feed each other and provide for each other. Part of my role as an agroecologist is paying attention and figuring out what those balances are. Because some plants absolutely do not like to grow together.
Yeah.
We've definitely had some plants that do fantastic with other partners and then just really hate the conditions that another plant is in, even if they occur naturally in that space. So it has been really cool to understand what does well together and also how to work not just with the things that we plant, but whoever is going to be coming to that space as well.
Yeah. So I'm really fascinated by this concept of companion plants. And so, and also specifically, because I know the Sky Farm, it's how many stories up in the sky?
She's 3 stories, yeah.
Yeah, so very high up there, and there's kind of particular concerns that you'll have in that space that you wouldn't have like on the ground. So thinking about your planting practices in this particular space, like what are some of the like specific concerns y'all deal with up there?
You know, I think that the Sky Farm is a really interesting case study for problems that a lot of conventional farms face. So we live in Texas. We live in the Gulf Coast region. Erosion is a huge problem here. Water retention, soil integrity, all of those things that are challenges of the Sky Farm are also challenges in conventional agriculture. So I think of this form of regenerative agriculture as creating solutions that can then be broadcasted to a larger scale. The areas that we leave to rest often are areas that are still productive for us. That looks like any number of things to, you know, when you aren't hand weeding down a section, or when you aren't spraying pesticides or herbicides for those things, the beings that come to that space sometimes fill a gap that you didn't know was there. We have been able to build so many of these incredible and important partnerships, partly because we are taking this slower. There are edges of the farm that kind of slope down towards the roof. Those are the areas that we're most concerned with erosion in. And so the opportunities that were there in noticing that erosion was a problem was creating areas that are untouched. So we have a no-mow section. I love that. It means that the bees and the different pollinators are able to grab any of the resources that they need without being disturbed by us. They can nest in those areas. We have ground-dwelling bees, so bees that nest in the ground, which is incredible. We have male longhorn bees that aren't allowed to sleep in the nest at night, and so they have to cling to pieces of grass or like rods that are dry, and they all gather together for like a little boys sleepover.
That's
so
cute.
It is really cute, and having spaces like that on a farm that is still productive, like we're still growing food and we're still sending people home with things when they come to our classes or to volunteer. That is meant to be a lesson in and of itself, that we do not have to be extracting from the land constantly to be receiving or observing some kind of benefit for the system. Yeah.
You mentioned a moment ago that part of what SkyFarm is up to is broadcasting solutions on a larger scale. But I'm also interested in this kind of like co-community with the land piece. So I'm wondering, I guess the kind of question that I'm thinking about is, are those two together? Is like how to broadcast y'all's message, which in part seems to be this kind of rethinking our relationships with land and with the beings who populate this land with us.
Yeah, I definitely think that those things are intertwined. I think very frequently, both in my position as a farmer and educator, but also just as a person who is from Texas, about how fraught the history of this land is. There are people, and have always been people, who have fought to protect the beings that are here and their communities, and us coming into this space and calling for a re-examination of our relationships with land is not anything new. But I do think that it is timely here in Texas. I think it's really important that we consider not only our impact as individuals on our own individual lives, but as community members, and then further than that, in the way that we all relate to each other. I think of land as the one thing that we all have in common. We all have come from a place. I like to think that we all have some level of a connection to a place. So allowing people the space to access education, because again, all of our education is free. Allowing people the space to access that education isn't meant to have them draw any specific conclusions. It is meant for them to examine their lives and their communities and understand the complexities and understand how they can be of service to their communities. We talked about this a little bit earlier, but the solutions for our communities have to come from us,
Right, yeah.
No one is going to come and save us besides ourselves. So it's about building capacity, and also about building upon this very long history of calling for a deeper relationship with the land in order to repair some of the fractured nature of that.
And what needs is SkyFarm addressing? So education, I think, is a primary one.
Yeah. So
talk maybe a little bit more about that, and then any other needs that you think SkyFarm is kind of playing with.
Absolutely. Definitely education. I really can't overstate the importance of education. The way that I understand education is that it gives us the tools to understand the complexities of our experiences. So whenever people come to the SkyFarm, whether it's for intentional group programming that they have arranged, or if they are someone who has just stumbled upon an open farm day lesson and they join, the idea is that we are allowing people a connection to the land that is not typically authorized. We we live in Texas. A lot of land is privately owned.
Mm-hmm.
So for people who live in urban spaces, they do not have a proximity to these natural spaces the way that people in other states may. We have some really beautiful parks. I love Memorial Park. I love like the Buffalo Bayou and all of the ecological restoration that's done through there.
Mm-hmm.
But getting people to the SkyFarm, they're usually there for dinner. You know,
Yeah.
they're there for dinner or for a concert. So we have the advantage of reaching people in a space that they didn't expect to find us. Yeah, which I also really love, you know.
The whimsy.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, the whimsy of having a farm on the roof.
Yeah.
So we definitely want to fill or at least aid in filling some of the gaps in community education and encouraging people to develop their own relationships with land. Because again, the things that someone who comes to the farm resonates with isn't necessarily going to be the thing that I resonate with.
Right.
But having the platform for people to access that education and go back to their communities and either start growing food or imagining solutions for the problems that face their own communities is a way that we can build resiliency as a city and as a region. So that's really important. I also see the farm filling a gap that I consider to be maybe a little bit more metaphysical, I guess. Humans and our connection to the land has existed since time immemorial. And existing under the systems that we do, where people have to work all the time or where their neighborhoods aren't necessarily in proximity to these green spaces, having a publicly facing platform at Post and getting people to the farm that didn't expect it to be there also means that we are responsible for making sure that their experience is what we want it to be, which is well-rounded. You know, I have no interest in running a conventional farm on the roof that perpetuates the same systems of extraction that we do in a lot of our larger agricultural spaces. I am interested in principles of regeneration that extend not just to the land but to ourselves and our communities, and figuring out what it looks like to heal our relationships to each other and to the land.
All right. I think I have just one more question
absolutely.
for you today. I promise.
No, it's totally okay. I could talk about this forever.
I mean, honestly, I could too. It's been really fascinating, a really fascinating discussion. But you talked about the principles of regenerative farming, and I'm just wondering, like, if there are people who want to get into regenerative farming on their own time, what resources do y'all offer these people?
So we have our open farm days on Wednesday evenings. Those are community plant lessons and also sustainability lessons. We try to get we teach lessons that are actively happening in the field. So it is not, oh, we're learning about this thing in the abstract. It is, we're learning about it, and then we're going to harvest okra.
Nice, yeah.
And then we're going to be passing out okra seeds, and everyone's going to plant them and take them home. So we do try and offer very well-rounded programming. I would also like to say that we have only been hands in the soil at SkyFarm for 4 years. So in the lifespan of a farm, that's nothing. You know, farms are around for 20, 50 years. So our interest is always growing with the community and what the needs of the community are. We, in this last spring, ran an apprenticeship program. So we will also be running that again this next spring. It is a program for people who want more in-depth education besides the open farm days. That has a heavier emphasis on the politics of land and understanding our relationships to community and land, and both talking about the logistics of growing plants, but what it means to be a scientist. You know, that's what the role that I have there is. It is a little bit more informal than being in a lab, but the SkyFarm is a huge laboratory. We are constantly trying things that are new or that are old and figuring out whether or not they work for the system that we have up there. And that is what our apprenticeship is meant to demonstrate a little bit more. So for people who already have that foundational knowledge of gardening but are looking to understand more about why regeneration is important, apprenticeship is perfect. Also open to the public, also free. The schedule is determined by student need. So when you submit your application, you select the days and the times that work for you, what topics you're interested in, and we curate the programming essentially for that student body. Yeah, it's awesome. We have volunteer days on Fridays. Those are 7 to 11 a.m. right now. They'll shift 8 to noon whenever we get further into the season. But the idea is that people can come and get their hands in the soil outside of learning opportunities. Someone may not be ready to sign up for a class, but they're like, yeah, sure, I'll plant some seed or I'll harvest stuff,
Yeah.
But those experiences are really helpful in honing in on people's passions and the questions that they have about their own relationship to community and land. So all of those 3 avenues are really wonderful. We are always looking to improve our programming. So for people who have engaged with us before, we also have like a feedback form essentially.
Oh, okay.
Where they can let us know what kind of programming they'd like to see.
Is that on y'all's website?
Yes,
okay.
Yeah. So we're starting to branch more into working with people who are doing ecological restoration and even people who are bird watchers, because we're starting to attract lots of really wonderful birds. But it's really awesome. I enjoy being the steward for the SkyFarm a lot. It is a really important community space, and it is also a really important space for me personally. So inviting people out for just the seasonal crop lessons, or if they have a community group that they want to bring out, we partner with churches, master gardener groups, school groups, all different people. So it does not matter your skill level, how well acquainted or how completely foreign gardening is to you. We welcome everyone.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, August, for chatting with me today. It was really great, and I'm hoping to get out to the Sky Farm. Like, genuinely, it sounds super, super cool, and I'm excited to get involved.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. Next up, we have Stephanie Gray, who works as a volunteer for the Ag Extension Office as a master gardener and is now the Children's Environmental Literacy Foundation Texas Program Director. We will be talking a bit about her previous work with the Ag Extension Office and her current role as an ongoing volunteer there. So, Stephanie, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. My name is Stephanie Gray. So I have lived in Houston now for 4 years. I'm originally from New York, where I have experience on a 55-acre diversified organic vegetable farm. I have a degree in environmental science. I also have experience with community organizing and canvassing. And more recently here in Houston, I have experience working as a plant scientist on a hydroponics farm. And then I did work with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service as a horticulture agent and continue to be involved with them as a Harris County Master Gardener volunteer.
All right. So tell us a little bit more about that volunteer position. What is a master gardener?
Yeah. Master gardeners are a program developed from Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service. So the county extension program exists in all 250 plus counties in Texas as part of the land grant university system. So every volunteer association is housed under the county's extension program. So here in Harris County, it's overseen by the horticulture agent. And us volunteers, we are our own 501c3 nonprofit organization. So the Master Gardeners have their own board of directors, and they also have, depending on the county, different programs that they kind of do with their community under the guise of horticulture education.
Okay. So then that's like what the master gardener position is. What do you specifically get to do as a master gardener?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's a lot of education tasks that I'm a part of. So the mission for the Harris County Master Gardener Association is to support educational programming. And a lot of that looks like translating research-based information from the university to the public. So that looks like educational programs throughout the county. We also maintain and teach at several demonstration gardens, and we have a presence at multiple farmers markets in Harris County where we're educating the public about best practices with gardening. And, we have a big focus on youth education, on general outreach. And my favorite part is probably maintaining the demonstration gardens. They're really great teaching tools.
Tell us more about these demonstration gardens. Where are they located? How can people visit them?
Yeah, so there's multiple different demonstration gardens around Harris County. So the primary demonstration garden for the Master Gardeners is in Pasadena. It's called Genoa Friendship Gardens. It's existed since the 1990s, where the Ag Extension agent at the time wanted to create a demonstration teaching garden in the south part of Houston. It's actually located in a food desert, so there are not very many green places in this part of Pasadena. The demonstration garden has a lot of different sections that can be used to demonstrate different practices and different growing techniques. So there's also an education building on that property where we host educational programs and where we train our volunteers, and also where they host plant sales for fundraising for the association.
Awesome.
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways to get involved. There are open garden days once a month, and information on that can be found on the Harris County Master Gardener Association website. And as I mentioned, we do a lot of youth education, so there's the opportunity to get a field trip at this location. Sometimes we'll have other garden clubs, senior groups, or after-school clubs. Some science teachers have taken their classes to do a tour or a hands-on workshop at the demonstration garden in Pasadena. So that's Genoa Friendship Gardens. There's also a demonstration garden in Herman Park at Centennial Family Vegetable Gardens. It's near the Rose Gardens, kind of by Lot C at Herman Park. These demonstration gardens are open, when the park is open, and the volunteers are there on Tuesdays and Thursdays in the morning. These are all raised vegetable beds. So the beauty about the demonstration gardens at the Harris County Master Gardeners have is that they demonstrate different growing techniques, right? So some in Pasadena are in the ground, some are in containers, and then at Centennial Family Vegetable Gardens, they're all in elevated garden beds and, high up containers.
Okay, so what's the benefit of these high up containers?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different raised bed techniques that you can use to grow vegetables. From the simplest 5-gallon bucket with a hole cut out or holes cut out at the bottom to an elevated brick and mortar raised vegetable garden bed that could be, anywhere from 2 feet to 4 feet off of the ground. These containers can be made of a lot of different materials. It really depends on the particular preference of the grower. So if you have budget constraints, recycled materials like 5-gallon buckets, I've even seen raised vegetable gardens made from recycled tires. You can use recycled wood or other materials like scrap materials to enclose an elevated space that you'll then fill with soil and plant in. At the Centennial Family Vegetable Gardens in Herman Park, a lot of them are wooden raised bed containers, and about every 5 years or so that wooden panel needs to be replaced. So a lot of them have just been replaced, and it's just another consideration into the materials you use is that maintenance. And I'm wondering, so you mentioned earlier food deserts. So for any of our audience members who might not know what that is or how that looks like in Houston, can you tell us a little bit more about that? Definitely. So food desert is a USDA, defined term, and there's maps that you can look at based off of census data that identify areas around Houston with a lack of access to fresh groceries. So that means that they are 1 to 2 miles away from access to produce, and that's not counting gas stations or convenience stores. And there's a lot of different pockets around Houston that are experiencing a lack of food access, and we call that a food desert. Yeah, so I'll just say that, the Master Gardener Associations are not only using these demonstration gardens as teaching tools, but the produce that we do harvest from these locations are donated to a food bank or to different shelters around Harris County.
Can community members walk into these places and also get food from the garden itself, directly?
So at our teaching gardens, there's not ownership from the community over certain beds. So it's kind of different from a community garden, which is where a member from the public can almost rent out or be assigned a bed. Our gardens are worked on collectively. So if a volunteer or community member comes in, wants to help out, they'll just be helping with whatever random task is needed that day. I will say that community gardens have their importance in place, and we work with a lot of partner organizations like Urban Harvest. A lot of community centers in different precincts will have their own community garden beds that individuals can rent out and maintain and harvest from.
And I'm wondering too, so regenerative agriculture. So is that something that y'all practice at these spaces? And if so, what does that look like?
Yeah, so it depends, again, on the section of the garden. So there is a permaculture demonstration site up towards the front of our Genoa Friendship Gardens demonstration area, where we have native plantings and regenerative agriculture and ornamental plantings with native plants. So this is something that's completely self-sufficient. It maintains a really important ecosystem for our pollinators. And you can tie that back into regenerative agricultural practices like composting, like permaculture. So we also have a different area of the garden that is using composting materials like wooden debris, used up plant organic matter to pile on top of it in sort of a big mound. And this can be a regenerative practice because you're breaking down nutrients, you're recycling that organic matter, and you can add that back in the garden. I will say that it's really, again, up to the individual whether or not they want to use chemicals, pesticides, or herbicides on their garden. Regenerative farming practices are just using nature to its advantage in the garden. So at the demonstration gardens, we do not apply any pesticides and we do not apply any herbicides to our vegetable beds. And we use organic composting, and we use this integration of permaculture practices, of native plants, of composting to create more of a self-sufficient gardening environment.
So when you say permaculture practices, what does that entail?
Yeah, so I like to think of permaculture practices and regenerative agriculture as sort of a spectrum, as a choice menu. So I really recommend gardeners use the tools that permaculture can provide. So the permaculture philosophy is, again, working with nature to support your garden. So that means having resources for pollinators and wildlife present and integrated into your garden space so you're not fighting against these other critters. You're creating a harmony in your garden where you can still harvest produce, but you're giving back to the land. You're not using a high intensive approach to gardening, so you're not depleting nature's resources. I think that some gardeners can pick and choose what practices work for them. If we're in a limited gardening space where someone only has access to a balcony, they only have a 5-gallon bucket, they might need some extra assistance for nutrient addition into the soil. They might need some more robust insect control because there aren't those natural predators and natural environment there to sort of maintain the garden in a regenerative way. So regenerative farming also just, again, it's low intensity farming or gardening, so you're not depleting resources, and then you're incorporating organic matter back into the soil as you go, or you're letting the soil rest for a season. So with some type of cover crop, so you can sort of mediate the soil that way. I'm really, a big proponent of, if you're in Houston, you're in a really difficult growing environment with a lot of natural predation for pests. And if you're on a limited budget, you just kind of pick and choose what gardening practices work for you for your location.
So, your current position, and then your previous position with Ag Extension, how did you land in these two positions? What were the steps that got you to this career?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when I was pursuing my undergraduate degree in environmental science, I had no vision for, that I would become a farmer, that I would be selling at farmers markets, that I would be working in environmental and ag education. I really got to farming through the lens of environmental stewardship and conservation. I studied, ecosystems, and then I kind of dove deeper into what builds communities. I learned a little bit more about urban planning and politics, and I was really able to connect the dots between farming as an integral part of our relationship to nature and also a tool of how to be good environmental stewards. And then, kind of through that learning development, I wanted to spend some time as a plant scientist. So I took my farming experience that I received post-college. I dove deeper into plant science. I ended up working at a hydroponics facility, but I always kind of had in my mind this connection back to community. I always had in heart why we're doing these agricultural practices, what the impact is for food access to the local community. So I kind of translated all of that technical background in agriculture in plant science to more of a non-formal educator role, really trying to teach gardening practices, teach, how to be a successful gardener and a successful farmer, I think is really important, because a lot of times people have the motivation, they see the impact of community gardens, and they just need the technical expertise and tools to make that happen.
Right. So, you're talking a lot about these community efforts. And so my next question, which will probably be my last question, which is what kind of support do you, in your various positions, offer people who are wanting to get into regenerative farming?
Yeah, that's awesome. So there's almost too much information available, right? That's the biggest thing I hear is just, where do I get started, right? I want to develop my green thumb, tell me how to plant a successful garden. You really have to start with a plan. So I encourage people to map out their intended garden space. So that includes, making a area calculation, how much can you grow in the space that you have. Also recording environmental conditions. How many hours of sunlight do you have a day? That will dictate what plants you can plant and what will be successful. Also monitoring your water, your rainfall, calculating in additional irrigation costs. So really just that planning phase is so important. It's fun to kind of jump right in and, start sprouting a green bean, and that's encouraged. But if you're looking to have longevity with your growing, if you're looking to up the amount of produce that you have each year, you really need to start with a good plan. That's identifying a location, mapping out the square footage of your growing area, and picking plants that will fit to your space.
Yeah. And the AgriLife Extension Office can help people with this if they were to reach out. Okay.
Yeah, so if you search Harris County AgriLife Extension Service, you'll get Houston-specific gardening resources. So we have a vegetable planting calendar that maps out what vegetable species are in season. That's a really great tool because you need to understand the growing season in order to have successful vegetables. There's also different varieties or species of vegetables that will do better in our location. So understanding the difference in these specific crops and where to get those seeds, you can find those resources at Harris County AgriLife Extension Service too. There's also the Master Gardener volunteers, right? So we're here to answer questions. If you check out the Harris County Master Gardener Association website, we have a Ask a Master Gardener tab that you can submit your gardening question, and our trained volunteers will personally respond to your emails and help you out.
That's great. Okay, well, thank you so much, Stephanie. I was definitely taking notes, and I'll be visiting that website later. My partner and I are currently thinking about doing a garden in our backyard, so that's going to be helpful information for me as well. So again, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks, Janie. Bye.
Now we'll go to our researcher, Naman, who has a piece on national parks for you. You may be surprised to learn that Texas is home to not just one, but 2 national parks, which are Big Bend and Guadalupe Mountains National Park. Today, we'll be zeroing in on Big Bend National Park, where desert, mountain, and river landscapes collide into one of the most ecologically and historically diverse areas in the United States. Big Bend's story starts over 10,000 years ago during the Paleo-Indian period. Small nomadic groups roamed this region, hunting big game like mammoths and herding buffalo. As time passed and the climate inevitably changed, so did the lifestyles of these peoples. During the Archaic period, around 6000 BC to 900 AD, the groups adapted by hunting smaller animals and gathering wild plants, using tools like grinding stones and pit ovens in the process. Later, in the late prehistoric period, new tools such as bows emerged, and the native groups continued to live off the land as they had before. By the time Europeans arrived in the 16th century, the region was home to groups like the Chisos and the Jumano, who were nomadic hunters, gatherers, and occasional farmers. However, the land was contested. In the 1700s, the Mescalero Apaches moved into Big Bend, pushing out the Chisos. By the early 1800s, the Comanches also traveled through the region on the Comanche Trail en route to raids of the Mexican interior, which continued until the mid-19th century. European presence in Big Bend began in 1535 with the Spanish expeditions, which were mainly motivated by the search for gold, silver, and arable land. However, religion was also a motivation, as Spanish missionaries arrived hoping to convert the native peoples as well. As a result, forts were built to secure the Spanish territory's northern border, but these were mostly abandoned because they were costly and ineffective against the resistance posed by the indigenous peoples. Following Mexico's independence in 1821, Mexican families also began to settle the Big Bend area. And after the Mexican-American War, the U.S. Army arrived, mapping the terrain and establishing new forts. Many of these Army surveyors were African-American soldiers known as the Buffalo Soldiers. The late 19th century brought ranchers to Big Bend as well, but overgrazing by sheep, goats, and cattle began to wear down the fragile desert ecosystem. In the early 20th century, mining boomed with the discovery of valuable materials, and small communities subsequently popped up around the mines. Farmers were also settled in the fertile Rio Grande floodplain. The Big Bend area was relatively free of conflict until 1910, when the Mexican Revolution turned Big Bend into a dangerous place, with skirmishes and raids crossing back and forth over the Rio Grande. Amid this backdrop of conflict and change, a vision for preservation began to take shape in the eyes of Texas lawmakers. A little over a decade after the conclusion of the Mexican Revolution in 1933, the Texas legislature created Texas Canyon State Park, renamed Big Bend State Park later that year. Just 2 years later, Congress passed legislation allowing for the land's transfer, and in 1944, Big Bend became a national park. At first, it was mostly unknown, with no paved roads and barely any visitors. The land around it was sparsely populated with just a handful of ranches. In the decades following its inception, Big Bend continued to develop, bettering the quality of its trails and roads, and the 1960s brought change to the empty park when the notion of modern tourism took root. Big Bend saw an influx of hiking enthusiasts, students, and birders on its trails, and resorts and motels were developed nearby, which made the park more accessible. Today, Big Bend is a biodiversity hotspot and a popular attraction for nature enthusiasts across the country. You can find over 1,200 plant species, including 60 types of cactus and thousands of insect species across the park's varying biomes, which include deserts, mountains, and river valleys. In the spring, the desert explodes with color from its blooming wildflowers, including Texas's iconic bluebonnets. You can also spot candelilla plants, which were once harvested for its wax but are now used in cosmetics. In terms of wildlife, Big Bend is home to diverse species such as cougars, coyotes, and gray foxes, which stay mostly hidden during the day. Big Bend is also home to over 450 bird species, including the Colima warbler, found nowhere else in the U.S. during breeding season. However, in addition to its flora and fauna, Big Bend is best known for its hiking trails, which are considered some of the most breathtaking in the country. Trails take hikers through mountain views, ancient rock formations, and deep canyons. There's really something for everyone at Big Bend, whether you're interested in wildlife, hiking through trails, or just camping beneath the stars. And speaking of stars, Big Bend was actually designated an International Dark Sky Park in 2012, which means it's one of the darkest areas in the entire continental US. On a clear night, the stars stretch endlessly across the sky, and you can see the Milky Way, faraway planets like Jupiter and Saturn, and constellations that once guided ancient peoples long before maps or satellites. So, from its ancient indigenous roots to its striking natural beauty and star-filled skies, Big Bend National Park is more than just a remote stretch of land in West Texas. So whether you're there for the views, the wildlife, or the stars, Big Bend National Park offers something worth seeing to everybody.
That's our show for this week. If you have questions or ideas for what you'd like featured on Gulf Streams, leave a voicemail at 713-348-4081 or email us at westonT@rice.edu. A quick reminder, you can catch up on Gulf Streams anytime through our podcast, available on all major podcast platforms. If you enjoy the show, please like and subscribe to make sure you never miss an episode. Gulf Streams is a co-production of KPFT Houston and Rice's Center for Environmental Studies and the Rice Sustainability Institute's Eco Studio. Produced by Weston Twardowski. Original music by Carter Dean. Research support provided by Neman Rensdorf and Sophia Soltez. Stay tuned for No Expectations with Marcus French here on KPFT Houston 90.1 FM, Galveston 89.5 FM, and Huntsville 89.7 FM.